Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Everyone please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Patty, may I have the roll call, please?
Mayor Marino.
Here.
Vice Mayor Marciano.
Here.
Councilmember Woods.
Here, ma'am.
Councilmember Lane.
Here.
Councilmember Litt.
Here. And I believe we have an addition with our additions, deletions, and modifications.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I will read the addition. Item K, Resolution 66, 2017, executing an interlocal agreement with Northern Palm Beach County Improvement District relating to the collection, removal, and proper disposal of storm-related debris. May I get a motion and a second?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, next item on our agenda is items of resident interest and board committee reports. And if I could be so bold as to say I would like to postpone this till our next meeting, which is in 2 weeks. I don't think there's going to be much happening between now and then. And in interest of time, I think that'd be a good idea.
Second.
Thank you. Comments from the public. Do we have any comment cards?
No, ma'am.
Thank you. City manager's report.
Yes, ma'am. I'd like to give everyone an update on the activities of the city involving our preparation for Hurricane Irma. So if you would bear with me, it's a little more lengthier than I like to be, but I think it's important that everyone understand, at least on the surface, how much work is being done. To begin with, in our pre-storm preparations, you can see is that we actually started training for this back in March, as we do every year, training for and doing simulations of how we conduct our business through all the phases of our preparation for storms such as this. And as you can see, once the state has declared a local emergency, we communicate with Palm Beach County management. We also have our contractual responsibilities with equipment, heavy equipment contracts. We put those into play. We have already gathered that heavy equipment in addition to what we already own. We communicate with the county. We communicate with the state. We line up our fuel deliveries, which we have contracts for. We've canceled the green market. The rec programs were canceled. We closed City Hall today at 3 o'clock and will remain closed tomorrow as well. And we anticipate, we hope and pray that we'll be able to open up Tuesday for regular business. With that, our Emergency Operations Center, as you know, we have a Category 5 EOC. It's our situation room before, during, and after the event. Central location. It's where information is received and disseminated into the field. We monitor there also afterwards, damage assessments. Then we direct our response and our recovery stage. Again, we coordinate with local, state, and federal resources and trying to get the resources we need to get the job done. We have a very unique system, a model of delivering service. This is an overview of where the fire stations are located throughout the city and where the EOC is. We have a unique model, I guess, as far as putting together emergency response post-storm. We do have crews also located in facilities over at the Lakeside building, but we do have 5 stations. In each station, we have prepared police response, fire response, rescue response, and public works support. This picture depicts the types of crew that we have at 5 different stations. There are, if you would, a task force unto themselves in 5 different locations throughout the city. They respond together in any situation. What that allows us to do is, in the event that we lose communications from the command center, Each of these independent operations have their own directions, and they have their own operating procedures. If we cannot communicate, once the storm is over and the all clear is given, they will go out of the stations and assume their duties and responsibilities, primarily clearing the roads for emergency vehicles, clearing the roads to hospitals, and that's the primary thing. Obviously, our first priority is the safety and well-being of our citizens, and we are capable at this point of clearing roads, bringing in rescue, fire units, and or police unit, whichever is necessary in the team. We also have backup at Lakeside and backup at the central location here at our EOC should we need that. This method avoids any delay in the process of getting to our residents and providing with their services. Currently, we will be activating the EOC facility Saturday at 2 o'clock. All city buildings will be secured by Friday afternoon. City Hall's closed. EOC setup will be completed by Friday. And all the communication devices that we need will be secured on Friday for our opening on Saturday. Stormwater system citywide will be inspected and cleaned one last time. Fire stations will be prepared and staged with all the equipment necessary by Friday afternoon. Construction sites will be inspected and will be completed by Friday. That's all the construction sites throughout the city will be completed by Friday. All of our parks and recreation facilities will be closed Friday, and Friday is the last day for waste collection. They'll be doing garbage only on Friday. Palm Beach County Shelter opens Friday at 10 o'clock in the morning. We have it on our website where people can contact the county. And our staging locations and emergency response personnel will be ready to respond by 2 p.m. On Saturday as well. So, as far as Hurricane Irma updates, you can go to www.pbgfl.com for questions concerning about shelters or evacuations or Palm Beach County's Department of Emergency Management. You have the phone number here where you can give a call and get information. We've been referring calls all day, taking calls all day. We have our telephone system is on voicemail, directing people where their call will go to. If they need the city, they will go to dispatch. If they need the county, this number will be given to them. We are ready, we are willing, we are able to meet this challenge, whatever it may bring, to the best of our ability and our resources to meet it. And you can rest assured that we will do it better than anyone else. So we don't really look forward to this, but at the same time, we feel that we're prepared and we're up for the challenge, and our staff is ready. With that, I'll answer any questions you might have. Good? Thank you.
Okay. Next is the consent agenda. May I have a motion to?
We have a motion to accept.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Okay. Next, we have Ordinance 19, 2017. Will the clerk read the title, please?
Madam Mayor, you need to read the quasi statement, please.
Tonight, we are holding quasi-judicial hearings on the following case. Resolution 55, 2017, Art in Public Places for La Posada Senior Living Facility. Resolution 60, 2017, approval of FPL Watts Substation. This means that the City Council is required by law to base its decisions on the evidence contained in the record of this proceeding, which consists of the testimony at the hearing, the materials which are in the official city file on this application, and any documents presented during this hearing. The Council is also required by law to allow cross-examination of any witnesses who testify tonight. Cross-examination may occur after the staff The applicant and other participants have made their presentations and will be permitted in the order of the witness's appearance. It is necessary that anyone who testifies at the hearing remain until the conclusion of the hearing in order to be able to respond to any questions. If you plan to testify this evening or wish to offer written comments, please fill out a card and give it to the city clerk. The city clerk will now swear in all persons who intend to offer testimony this evening on any of these cases.
Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
May the clerk read the title, please.
Ordinance 19, 2017, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Palm Beach Gardens, Florida, adopting the budget for the City of Palm Beach Gardens for the fiscal year commencing October 1, 2017, and ending September 30, 2018, providing a conflicts clause and a severability clause, providing an effective date for other purposes.
I'll open the hearing. Staff presentation, please. Hi, Alan.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I'm not sure if this is on or not. Is that not on? Or
There you
it
go.
Is it? Okay. For the record, Alan Owens, Finance Administrator. We're pleased to be here before you tonight to present first reading of Ordinance 19, which is the first reading and adoption of our proposed budget for fiscal year 2017-2018. Just the first thing, just to give everybody an idea where we are in the budget process. Of course, we have set the maximum operating rate. Line item budgets have gone out. The Budget Oversight Review Board has sent out their final report. It's a very beautiful report that was done this year. It was posted online for all members of the public to review. And of course, we're here tonight for the first reading of the proposed budget on today's date, September 7th. So with that, before we get into some of the details, the numbers, this year we wanted to give a little more background, a little more information from a big picture point of view of how departments go about preparing their budgets, what we look to each year. And it all starts with the city's vision or mission statement, which was adopted through a visioning process quite a few years ago. And I'm not going to go through and read every single thing, but you can see you spells out the acronym of GARDENS. And that sets the tone for everything. And as part of that visioning process, there were also 10 strategic goals that were established. We'll go through those quickly. A sense of community, responsive and fiscally sound government, character of the city, quality education, economic vitality, environment, parks and recreation, quality and affordable housing, water management, and growth. So what we do as departments, and again, starting with a mission statement and working down through those 10 strategic goals, each department then, and as part of their budget preparation, formulates departmental objectives that align with one or more of those strategic goals. And just to give you an example of one of these measurements, looking at the police department, under the goal of responsive and fiscally sound government, one of their service level objectives is to acquire sufficient personnel, training, and equipment to support the growing needs of the city. This particular objective is measured by tracking total response times and the percentage of times of calls that are answered within 10 seconds. And we measure this each year. We come up with our 2 years of actual and a projection for the next year. And so we track this throughout the year and measure to see how we're doing in attaining our objectives, again, working towards the overall vision statement of the city. Some of the other documents that go into the formulation of each year's budget, both short-term and long-term. We have, obviously, comprehensive plan, which plays a big part in levels of service. A lot of the things before you know very well, the stormwater plan, pavement plan, facilities roof assessment. Obviously, collective bargaining agreements are very important in preparation of each year's budget. Some of the other documents, we'll hear a little bit more about this, the maintenance, repair, and operations plan. Also citizen surveys. When we put this budget together, we had the most recent survey done in 2015, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of the key initiatives that we're trying to address from that survey. The most recent survey that was just done, basically it was very positive and just kind of reinforces a lot of the things that were brought out in the 2015 survey. Also, one of the new documents is our 5-year, or not 5-year, but our infrastructure sales surtax capital improvement plan. And of course, our 5-year capital improvement and 5-year financial forecast. So we talked about the 2015 citizen survey. Again, very positive. As you can see, overall rating of 4.28 out of 5.0. There were several items, though, that we're attempting to address. We call them key initiatives for next year. And again, these are grouped under one or more of those 10 strategic goals. And under the responsive and fiscally sound government, the first item here, a lot of residents wanted to see improvements to the police and fire departments. So you can see some of the action items. We're proposing 8 additional police officers next year, 2 fire code compliance officers, funding in the general fund for about $1.1 million of various capital improvements. Fleet Maintenance Fund continues their program of replacing of police vehicles and also fire rescue apparatus. And next year, as is our practice, we are funding 100% of what the actuaries tell us we need to contribute to both the police and fire pension plans. Still with under the goal of responsive, fiscally sound government, most residents, based on the survey, would rather pay for services out of ad valorem taxes than other fees and charges. So again, we continue in this budget to not levy things that other cities do, like utility taxes on electric, water, gas, collection fees for curbside solid waste recycling, stormwater assessments, fire assessments. And again, mail, hard, good old-fashioned mail continues to be the most popular way of receiving information. So we're, again, funding a full year's productions of the Signature City publications. Under Parks and Recreation, which is a very popular item here in the city, 95% agree Parks and Recreation services are vital to the community. Some of the action items you can see here: funding for the first full year's operating cost for the Joseph Russo Athletic Complex, partial year funding for the new athletic fields and facilities to be constructed on the county-owned district park. And again, just the construction of that park itself goes towards this overall goal of Parks and Recreation being very vital to the community. And funding for the staffing of the Sandhill Crane Golf Course Clubhouse has been provided in next year's budget via a temporary staffing firm, not bringing on full-time employees to staff that operation. And the funding for the maintenance, repair, and operations of the Parks and Recreation facilities has been provided. Under the Parks and Recreation, continuing, you can see the various capital items funded in the general fund. Most significant would be Greens Gardens Park Pavilion improvements and Burns Road Community Center modernization improvements. Under the goal of environmental stewardship, a lot of residents favor for the city to pursue opportunities to purchase and or set aside green space. And so, as always, staff will continue to explore opportunities to do this, either via purchase of land or through our development practices where we set aside green space. Good example is the Avenir development, where over 50% of that project was set aside for conservation. And under the goal of economic vitality, a significant number of residents favor more development, particularly bioscience development. So we continue to set aside $2.3 million for economic development incentives next year. And growth is an issue that people are always interested in. So our items next year is we have continued funding for various studies, such as the mobility study, which has already been begun, so we're funding that, continuation of that, and any other types of transportation and growth studies that may come up throughout the year. So moving on to get into some of the numbers for next year's budget, our total property valuation for next fiscal year is $10.9 billion. That's up from $10.1 billion in the current year, including new construction of $249 million. As far as our proposed millage rate, next year we're proposing to keep the operating rate the same at 5.55 mils. The debt service millage rate would go down slightly to 0.1178. The rollback rate is 5.2671, and the percentage increase over that rollback rate is 5.37%. So if you want to take a look at how does the proposed rate affect some typical properties, if we look at, first of all, three typical homesteaded properties, we take a look at values of $450,000, $350,000, and $250,000. After the $50,000 exemption, and with the increase of 2.1% under the Save Our Homes cap for this current year, you can see it calculates out to a monthly increase of about $2, $3, or $4. If you look at three non-steaded homes, again, looking at values of 200, 300, and 400,000, you have to make some assumptions as to how much those properties would increase. So when we've used the citywide average of 5.37%, the annual increase equates to monthly increases of $5, $7, or $10. Again, this is a graphic that we showed that shows how much of the total taxes that a resident pays goes to the city, and it's about the same as last year. It's about 28 cents of every dollar that you pay on your total tax bill actually goes to the city. Moving on to as far as the total budget, when we look at all funds, revenues, and sources, you can see the different categories of revenues that make up that total. Ad valorem tax is the largest category of revenues, $59.2 million. Projected carryover of fund balance or cash carryover is about $40.7 million. Our expenditures for all funds are balanced at $150.6 million. Again, you can see the various categories. Personnel, being a service organization, personnel is the largest category. It comes in at about $70 million. You can see the operating capital and debt, and our reserve is $40.3 million for next year. When you go down to the general fund total budget revenues, $114.3 million. You can see the various categories again that make up that total. Ad valorem again is the largest single piece of the pie there, and our projected carryover in the general fund is $28.7 million. Expenses, again, balanced at $114.3 million. And you can see the various categories again. Personnel in the general fund is about $56.8 million. You can see the operating capital totals, debt service. Reserves total about $28.2 million in next year's general fund budget. If we look at the changes in the general fund revenues and expenditures, recurring revenues excluding carryover balances are up about 5.5%. Expenditures excluding reserves and capital or recurring expenses are up about 6.2%. So we look at some of the drivers of the total cost, and that would be personnel and operating expenses, taking a look at some of the factors that really affect those total costs, starting with personnel. Total personnel cost, that would be salaries, FICA, retirement, health, life, workers' comp insurance. For all funds, it's up about $4.8 million. It's significant to note, though, of that total, $1.5 million, or 2.3%, is due to just two items that we really have had no control over. That would be an increase in the fire pension contribution of a little over $900,000 and an increase in health claim cost funding into our self-insured fund of about $600,000 due to claims experience. Again, continuing with personnel highlights, as far as total pension contributions next year, the total is about $8.7 million. That's up mainly due to the $900,000 increase in the fire contribution. Total positions requested next year, 515 full-time. It's an increase of 19, but I wanted to point out that we're really about where we were pre-recession back in 2007, 2008. So if you think of roughly the same employees and population is significantly more since then, we're still doing more with less than we were back in pre-recession days. Taking a look at those new positions, breaking it down here, again, we have the 8 police officers being requested. We have the 2 fire code compliance officers. We have 4 positions partially funded for next year for the new district park. And we have 2 part-time positions that are requested to go to full-time. And we have 1 administrative specialist and then 2 positions funded out of the Youth Enrichment Center. It's significant to note that those positions are not paid out of the general fund or tax dollars. They're paid out of program revenues that are generated in that fund. We mentioned earlier the maintenance, repair, and operations program. Facility maintenance, we have set aside $586,000 next year to continue that program. Just a few pictures to show some examples of some of the work that's been done. This particular slide is Fire Station 1 roof repairs. Some pictures before, during, and after that work was done. As far as parking lot resurfacing, we've allocated $140,000 to continue that program. And you can see some of the work that's been going on recently with this year's allocation of money. We have $158,000 programmed for repair operating cost for parks. And of course, you can see some of the beautiful parks that we have here in the city to maintain those at that level. Stormwater infrastructure repair, this is our annual allocation of $500,000 to continue that program. And again, you can see some of the work that's been done with that money that's been allocated in this year's budget. The canal maintenance allocation, this is the second year for this program, $250,000 for the annual dredging and maintenance plan. And you can see some particular section before and after. Significant improvement there. Other fees and charges, we talked a little bit about that earlier. Residential curbside garbage or trash, again, we don't charge that. Electric, water, or natural gas, utility taxes, we do not levy that. City stormwater assessments, the city does not levy any stormwater assessments, and nor do we levy any city fire assessments. And that's important when we do a comparison of some of the other neighboring cities, when we do a comparison of not just ad valorem taxes, but total cost to a typical resident. And so that calculation, this example that we did this year is we took a $350,000 homesteaded property. You can see the assumptions for electric and gas consumption per year and the water consumption, and then the annual charges for cell phone, cable TV, those types of communication charges. So based on those assumptions and that value of a home, you can see the total cost for that Palm Beach Gardens resident comes in at $6,229. You can see Boca Raton is next then with total cost of $6,242. These next several municipalities, if you can note that their city ad valorem rate is very low. But if you look at the other ad valorem cost, it's up significantly. That's because these municipalities use the Palm Beach County Fire Rescue MSTU. So they have a very low city tax rate, but then the residents have to pay for the Palm Beach County MSTU. They also have other things, again, that we don't have, and so you can see the total calculations here off to the right. And then you have these North Palm, Riviera, West Palm. You can see the totals for that typical home in those cities. Just looking at some of the other highlights of the funds, special revenue funds, we have a gas tax fund. You can see the things that are paid out of that fund. Of course, the Golf Special Revenue Fund, there's a picture, and it looks a lot better now, I know, but this is some time ago when it was being early in the construction phase. We also have the Recreation Special Revenue Fund. We're all familiar with the programs run out of there. Significant to note that their reserve balance is still over $540,000 in next year's budget. We have a couple of internal service funds. These are funds that provide services to the using departments. Self-insured health fund, we talked about that earlier. We did have to increase funding slightly, but the reserve balance is still very healthy at $5.8 million. Our fleet fund provides maintenance and purchases replacement vehicles for the using departments. You can see the total program next year of vehicle replacements in that fund, $876,000. Impact funds, total revenues for all of the impact funds next year is $1.7 million. You can see the expenses that are budgeted. Debt service for the Burns Road, which should be paid off in about 3 more years, I think. $98,900 in capital, $75,000 for fire rescue vehicle lifts due to expansion of the Ops Center, and some $24,000 for additional equipment at the new Ironwood Park. Just to highlight some of the things that have already been accomplished or are underway from the various impact funds. Out of the Recreation Impact Fund, the Joseph Russo Athletic Complex that was recently completed. The golf clubhouse that's well underway. Out of the Police Impact Fund, the Tactical Training Facility that was completed not too long ago, paid for out of Police Impact Fund. Out of the Fire Impact Fund, money has been allocated for a public safety training complex at a site, the Seacoast site over near Richard Road. And in the Road Impact Fund, we have money allocated for Johnson Dairy Road improvements. When I say allocated, it's money that's already in the budget and not new money that's budgeted next year. Just want to clarify that. And Shady Lakes Drive improvements that have been made using road impact funds. So we get into talking about the financial forecast. When we put our forecast together, it's based on these assumptions. We're recommending that the operating millage rate stay flat at 5.55. Debt millage would be reduced in 2020 as we pay off all of the old general obligation debt. Unassigned fund balance remains stable at $23.1 million. We have factored in the very strong possibility or likelihood, I would say, of additional $25,000 exemption, which the voters will decide in November of 2018. If it's decided and approved, then would not affect our budget until FY 2020. So we have factored that in. We are projecting to use $600,000 of budget stabilization reserves. And I'm too quick on my finger there, sorry. Okay. So when we factor in all of those assumptions, we graph it out on the chart here. The green bar will be the unassigned fund balance or reserves of $23.1 million. The red bars will represent the budget stabilization reserve fund, which you can see actually increases slightly, but then after the homestead exemption goes down slightly. It's at the end of the 5-year period, it's about $1.4 million. And we take a look at the total millage rate, including debt service, next year would be about 5.67. As debt is paid off, it goes down. And then in 2020, it levels out at the total rate would be the 5.55. If, for example, we were to reduce the rate to 5.50, we'll take a look at what that does. Our unassigned fund balance actually by 2021 starts to be reduced, and by 2022 it's down $2 million to $21 million. The budget stabilization reserve after 2020 is actually eliminated. We have nothing in that account. But the millage rate would be lower. It would start out at about 5.61, goes down as the debt service is paid, and then levels out at the 5.50. So another option we looked at is, okay, what if we reduce the rate but then increased it at some point later to restore reserves to where they would be in our proposal. So by doing that, you can take a look at how that would look. The unassigned reserves, again, with increasing the rate, would stay flat at $23.1 million. Budget stabilization would stay relatively flat, or where we project it would be under our recommendation. But when you look at the rate, again, it would start out at the 5.61. It would go down as debt is paid. But then you'd have to increase it in 2021 to restore the reserves back to where they would be under our recommendation. So when we were looking at these various proposals, it reminded us of a couple of budget oversight reports recently. Going back in 2016, the committee stated they firmly believe avoiding a yo-yo effect on millage rates and maintaining fiscal responsibility must be paramount. Also, and I think this next sentence, given the current circumstances, is very pertinent, and it says this: although there may be a temptation to further lower the millage rate for 2016, we must be cautious given the real possibility of a catastrophic event affecting our area that may significantly hamper the city's abilities to respond and avoid future increases. And again, that was from the 2016 report. That sentiment was echoed again in 2017 about urging a reduction, the temptation to reduce a millage rate and avoid a yo-yo effect. And speaking of budget oversight committees, the 2018 Budget Oversight Review Board has issued their report, as I said earlier, which is available online. And just to summarize their report, and again, this is only 2 items. It's like a 12-page report. It's very thorough. But the 2 critical items in my mind are these statements. Generally, the board is pleased the city is maintaining the operating millage rate of 5.55 and avoiding an overall tax increase. And then with respect to the 1-cent sales tax funds, the board finds that the city is acting responsibly and in the best interest of the residents with respect to the expenditures of the tax funds. And I would be remiss if I didn't just mention the board, and I don't know if any of them are here tonight, but the board, the chairman, Mark Feldmesser, vice chairman, Dennis Barron, members Mark Schulte, and our 2 new members, Andrew Commodore and David Middleton, did just an excellent job this year, as evidenced by the report that they prepared. So I wanted to thank them. And, Mary and I, look forward to working with them throughout the year. And so just as a quick summary, the 2017-18 budget plan accomplishes the following: sets aside money for continuing the stormwater renovation and canal maintenance program, provides funding for additional employees to keep up with increasing demand for services, provides full funding for all of the collective bargaining contracts and an adjustment for non-union employees, and maintains the operating rate flat at 5.55 and reduces the debt from 0.1281 to 0.1178. So with that, Madam Mayor, after council discussion, we do have required action per state statutes that we have to follow, and staff would recommend a motion that the city of Palm Beach Gardens adopt a proposed millage rate of 5.6678, which includes a debt millage of 0.1178 and an operating rate of 5.55 mils, which is greater than the rollback rate of 5.2671 by 5.37%. And then staff recommends a motion to approve Ordinance 19, 2017 on first reading, adopting a budget for fiscal year 2017-2018. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. That was very well done. And I don't have any cards, so no one wishes to speak on this item? So I will close the hearing. Okay, may I get a motion and a second, please?
I think we need to have a little bit of discussion. If
That
that's
comes
okay.
after the motion and the second.
Oh, sorry. I apologize.
That's okay. May I have a motion and a second,
I'll
please?
make a motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, bring it back for discussion. Rochelle, any questions?
For the city manager, on the current budget proposal with our unassigned reserves being about 23 million, that's about how many months worth of city operations do we have covered in light of the storm that we have coming? I think the perspective on this shifts a little, where we may not have enough allocated in other parts of the budget to cover everything we need.
With the level of reserves that we have right now today, we're looking at possibly 3 months, 90 days worth of cash to be able to operate. And given the catastrophic event that's heading towards us, it's going to take a lot more if it's as bad as everyone is telling us it is. So I'm having a lot of concern over what's going to happen over the next couple, 2-3 days.
And the two behind it.
Yes.
And we're halfway through hurricane season, so that's a big concern, okay? I had one other question, I guess, for Alan, about the two charges that we ended up on this budget with that we hopefully won't have to deal with going forward, that added up to about $1.5 million. Could you talk a little bit about the fire pension and what caused that $900,000 one-time?
Yes, they were due to primarily to changes in assumptions, due to a change in the assumed investment rate of return, and also to a change in the mortality tables per the state's requirements. So the board had to make that change, and they're in the plan, as is the fire or police pension plan, of gradually reducing their assumed rate of return. But these are one-time adjustments. Hopefully that we should. Once those adjustments have been made, all other things being equal, it should level out.
And the other was the
going
health
forward.
care claims
And
this
the other
year,
was the
which-
health care claims, yes, $600,000. Again, that's just due to experience of the overall plan. You know, you can never tell with health claims, but it was just an unusual year that we're having with a few very high cost claims, and just, you know, per the actuaries' recommendations, we were recommending to increase it based upon the current levels of experience, which is about $600,000.
that we're putting in this
that
year
we're
to
putting in
cover that.
yeah.
So it's possible next year, or hopefully likely next year, that extra money will be in the general fund, because we shouldn't have these.
It's possible that we may not have to have any increase in our health claims or funding for our health insurance costs next year. It's possible, but we'll have to just see how claims develop this current year or
If
next
I
year.
may add, too, we do have healthy reserves in
We
the
have.
health.
Yeah. So we have a reserve balance of about $5.8 million that we noted, which is a total of almost about 11 months, I would say, worth of claims. So it's a very healthy fund balance right there.
And I have one more question for city manager. It's my understanding that there are a couple of legislative issues that almost passed this time that we didn't get hit with that could further affect our budget going forward. Could you talk a little bit about the tax money we could stand to lose if home rules encroached upon again by the legislature?
Yes, this past legislative year, the legislature was giving serious consideration and almost passed two additional pieces of legislation in addition to the Homestead Act. As far as the homestead exemption is concerned, Alan will be telling you it's about
It's about $1.8 million.
$8 million that we have considered in this year's budget. What we have not considered is the legislature has said that they will be bringing back two other I'm having trouble because I'm sick as a dog, preemption bills. And one of them is communications tax, and the other is the business tax. If that comes back, and it will, we're positive, given the legislature's makeup as it is coming up, that could have a significant impact. And Alan, could you go through the process and show where we would be given the impact of the loss of revenue? And it's a very nice gift that the legislature can give the business community at no expense to themselves. But when it comes to local home rule and allowing local government to make decisions of how they want to operate through their zoning and their home rule right to develop these types of fees and charges, they're going to preempt it, and they can be Santa Claus at no expense to themselves, and that's what we're seeing that's happening here, and Al will show the impact of that.
Okay, what you see before you is an Excel projection model that staff developed quite a few years ago that we use to run different scenarios for our 5-year projections. And on this sheet right here, you see for the 5-year projection period, the total revenues. You can see year by year going across here, the total revenues. You can see the total expenditures on this row here. And on this row here, you can see the excess of revenues or excess of expenditures over revenues. And as I said earlier, we're projecting to use about $600,000. And that's reflected on this line here, the $567,000 right here. So the way this reads then is you can see the 567 is deducted from the budget stabilization, the 2.5. So we wind up with 1.9. And going across for the 5 years, you can see it winds up at about $1.4 million based on the assumptions that we've programmed in here. And that's on this tab over here. And just briefly what you have before you, we can go in and change any of these expenditure assumptions for different types of salaries or insurance or other operating costs. And over on this side, we can go in and change revenue assumptions, anything as far as growth and projected growth in taxable value, new construction, millage rates, growth in other sources of revenue. For this year, we've also added a couple of drop-down items here, actually 3. And what we had done, we've developed the program here to factor in the additional homestead exemption, but we did not factor in additional impacts from the repealed business tax receipt and nor the communication service tax. But if we were to do that, click yes here, and then refresh the pivot tables, and then go to the summary charts over here, you can see what happens then is your budget stabilization then is wiped out. After the second year, your unassigned fund balance of $23 million goes down to $9.3 million. And more importantly, if you look at this row here, you're faced with a current year deficit of, in other words, expenses more than revenues by almost $4.7 million. So, and that's without changing the millage rate. So obviously, you're faced with a big problem to address if that happens. So that's the way this chart works. If you have any questions on that, it's just a tool that we developed to try to help us in our 5-year forecasting.
Thank you.
Matthew, any questions?
Yeah, in light of the fact that our first responders and our city manager's office need to prepare for the hurricane, I'll be brief. Al, just briefly, could you explain the methodology that you used to calculate the necessary reserves? Why did you come up with that number? And briefly, why is that the appropriate
briefly,
number?
we did examination years ago when we came up with our fund balance policy of some recommendations from the Government Finance Officers Association. We looked at some other neighboring communities and came up with that at least a minimum of 2 months or 17%. We've been fortunate to have more than that, and again, just based on the current scenarios of things going on, I don't know that 26 or 27% is too much actually right now, the 23 million. But that's initially how we did it. We looked at recommendations from the Government Finance Officers Association. We also looked at some other neighboring communities. And you'd be surprised, some of the larger cities, Boca, their minimum reserve for unassigned is only about 10%. So you get a lot of different numbers. They're all over the board. Typically, you might see a very large city could have a smaller percentage, but dollar-wise, it's a huge amount. On the other side of the coin, you could have a small city that has a large percentage, could be 50%. But it might only be $3 million in total. And for a small coastal city, that's $3 million is not a lot of money either. So it's all over the board, but that was our initial thought process when we developed the policy.
Thank you, Alan.
Mark, any questions?
I don't have any questions. I wouldn't mind if you would give me just a minute. I know everyone's busy and wants to get home, but I do have a couple of comments, mainly because, when we were running for office last year, part of the reason why I felt I was qualified for this position was because of my time on the Budget Review Board, Budget Oversight Committee at the time, and I want to thank the staff. Always comes up with really good, detailed information, which I've always credited to really good efforts in making sure that the numbers are accurate. Also, I want to thank Andrew and Mark Feldmesser for making me look really bad, because, boy, the report is excellent. And anybody that's ever written one in the past, we should feel shame. But ultimately, when we talk about government, I know the first thought people have is, what is the minimum requirements for government? And every municipality and every town and every level of government is probably going to be different. Our survey obviously shows that our residents want certain services that are probably, well, I can't say probably, maybe more than what other communities would want around the country. Every level of government's going to have to choose what they want, what they don't want, and every set of residents are going to want to do that. All of us have lived in this town for a long time. We've all talked to our residents and our neighbors and our friends, and the survey kind of shows what we all thought, is that people want the services that they have. They want to have nice parks. They want to have good roads, and that's what we have here in the city. So that does change some of the conversation. Some people think that maybe we should be starving government in order to minimize their revenues, in order to really concentrate on the core issues of government. And I don't know if I always believe in that thought. My first hope was that I could come up here during our first budget meeting and ask for a millage reduction. I think the legislature went ahead and patted themselves in the back to do that on their behalf, to make themselves look good. And we certainly could probably sit up here and do the same, since we have 3-year terms, and maybe 2 if we're lucky enough to be reelected to this position. And at that time, we will be leaving the council and leaving whatever shortfalls to future councils, especially on knowing what the future legislature is going to do. So, and then of course we have the big old storm waiting for us to spend lots of money, and potentially lots of money, and you never know what FEMA is going to do, or come back to us 10 years from now and ask for their money back and ask for records. And I know that the city will do a good job in making sure that the records are done properly, but you still don't want to see any of that risk. So, I just wanted to make the comment that even though I would love to come up here and I'd love to be able to go to our future Chamber of Commerce meetings and other events around League of Cities, et cetera, and say Palm Beach Gardens stood up and reduced the millage at a time when people didn't think it was possible, but I don't think that's proper. So I think it's probably wise, at least at this time, that we maintain the millage where it's at. And I wanted to explain that because I know that sometimes, maybe I just think I'm more important than I am, I don't know, but I wanted to make sure that whomever listens knows where I came from because of my time on the committee. I do think that we're going to have plenty of opportunity to maintain infrastructure projects beyond what's probably already budgeted for, but we'll monitor that as time goes on. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Well said. Carl.
Are we encompassing questions and comments at the same time, or do we come back for comments?
No, go right
after
ahead.
that?
Say whatever you need to say.
I have a question just because I don't know. We don't have the ability to foresee overtime, sick time, employees out on extended leave for medical reasons, or how do we budget for that? And does that money, is it somehow in the budget, or does it come from someplace else? Or because there's probably no, and I'm not even thinking about the hurricane, but that will be a perfect example of where does this money come from, since it's an unknown.
Well, with regards to hurricanes and these types of things, no, there's no way to budget for these. So we have to charge them to our budgets, and we account for all of these hurricane-related costs via projects, and then document everything and submit it to FEMA for reimbursement. As far as just regular overtime, the departments are very good at looking at historical spending trends. I mean, they've got it down to a science as far as estimated number of days that need to be covered, for example, in the fire department due to, shift changes or all these different things that they have. So they're very good at estimating the normal kinds of recurring types of overtime just based on historical levels. But no, hurricanes and things like that we just can't predict. So we just have to we pay it, we document it, submit it to FEMA, and do the best we can to get reimbursed.
Understood.
If I may add a little bit to that, Al does this all the time as far as FEMA reimbursement and our staff, but it's not as easy as he may make it seem, because we have been in scenarios with FEMA where they have so many years before they cannot come back and try to audit and for the third or the fourth time and try to take money back from us. And Al, I'll tax your memory because I don't remember. The last time they came back to us, they wanted to take the reimbursements that we had requested, and I forget the amount. Do you recall?
The best that I could, it was a few $100,000.
Yeah,
So,
and what did they walk away with when we got through with them 4 years or 3 years later?
and actually, we're still not through with them.
Okay. So with the FEMA thing, we have to spend the money. We may get partial payment back from FEMA, but it's always out there for 3 or 4 years, I think, by contract before they can come back and re-audit you and try to take some money back. So as far as our overtime, sick time, and those things are calculated, Al's right. We take a 3 to a 5 year look and analyze trends analysis. We look at staffing levels, and we look at what has happened in the past and compare it to the current staffing levels, and we do percentages, and we try to come up with a trend or analysis, which is the best we can do, and you're absolutely right. You don't know how much you're going to spend, but it's based on a good calculation, and things change during the year. You could have 5 or 6 employees go out on extended illness, and then you just got to pay overtime to get other employees to come in. So you're totally aware of the fact that you can't figure that. And when people say, "Oh, you're overspending your overtime budget," well, if I didn't, you wouldn't have the services that you're having today because I got 5 people out on extended illnesses. So yes, it's a good point.
I just wanted to ask that so I don't have to ask it again next year. So now I know where you're coming from. It's funny how 8 months will change what we forecast up here. And I know Mark and Matt campaigned, let's take a look at reducing Miller. I think we all would be excited to look at it hard and reduce something. And just this year alone, you look at everything that legislative has changed, got a hurricane in our face, and these other things. But all year long, I did it different. I took this budget as it was discussed, as pieces came together. I got a printout of this, and I took it to the public, and I took it to some of my constituents, and I was ready to have a sit-down discussion and get into the nitty-gritty of this particular budget. And I was really surprised at how people that probably have never even been to a council meeting, how educated they were on just Palm Beach Gardens because they've lived here for wherever. And everybody that I spoke with, and I appreciate all the emails I receive, the texts that I receive, but when I had verbal conversations with people even as late as today, they, just like all of us, they love Palm Beach Gardens, they support the police, they support the fire, they want the parks, they want us to continue on smart growth, traffic programs, and you know, I think I try to listen more than I speak, and I speak a little bit up here at the end of the month to reflect what I've learned by the citizens. And the citizens that everybody I spoke with really would rather leave it alone, keep it flat, go forward. And then, of course, I had conversations prior to today. Then, of course, everybody was still concerned of the infrastructure of the city itself if this hurricane really does cost the city millions upon millions. So it's just weird how 8 months will go, and it's seems to be easier this year than it was last year. But thank you for your time.
Okay, before I go, anybody have any more?
I just have one last comment. You know, I did have a conversation with Dorothy Jacks last week or 2 weeks ago, and she did make the comment that the legislature's efforts to reduce the tax burden on the homeowner is actually working against the small businesses, working against the renters, working against homes, including her parents who live here in the city, who've lived here for over 35 years, I think she said 40 years, and the taxable value of their house is only $100,000. So they're not going to realize any tax savings, whereas if we had the opportunity to lower millage, everybody would have had an opportunity to see some lower taxes. So that's, again, just a disservice that the legislature did, but it is what it is, so thanks.
Thank you. Okay. I will actually close this off and say, fabulous job you did. And I think I said the same thing last year, but I read all of the budgets from the different cities. Ours is the easiest budget to read, and I appreciate that. I also want to talk a little bit about our reserves. And Rochelle, you must have been looking at my questions because you asked all the same questions. Good job. With the $23 million in reserves, as our budget keeps going up, and that percentage actually will become a smaller and smaller percentage in reserve because we're not adding anything to the reserves. So right now where it is 28%, if our budget goes up 5%, that's going to become 27%. So that's something that no one actually ever talks about, but our reserves are here. They're not changing. So that's an important thing to look to in the future, especially with a Cat 5 hurricane in our face right now. Question, you said we have 100% pension funding? Did I say that properly?
Well, when I said 100%, we're funding 100% of the required contributions into the plans per the actuaries' calculations. The plan funding levels are not 100%, so I just want to clarify that we're putting in what the actuaries say we should put in.
And this might be a hard question to answer, but if you were to compare our funding of the pensions versus other cities in the county, how are we doing?
They're making very good progress. Years ago, they were like 42 or 38%. They're up in close to 80% funded, both of them, right now. So they're doing very well compared to other plans.
Thank you. I do want to say that the Budget Oversight Review Board did a fabulous job, and very, very easy to read. Their conclusions were very concise, and I do agree that we should be keeping the millage. And there isn't a person up here that wouldn't want to lower our taxes. But lowering our taxes and then having to put us in a position where we've got to raise the taxes again in the future is not sound business. So I am all in favor of the budget as it is presented to us. And if I have no further discussion, may I have a motion?
We had a motion. Actually, we will need two motions, but we did have an initial motion. I believe it was Councilmember Litt and Councilmember Woods who seconded that motion for this discussion.
I'm sorry, Madam Mayor, just remember there are certain required actions. We do need a motion first that would be read as such, or staff recommends a motion that the City of Palm Beach Gardens adopt a proposed millage rate of 5.6678 mils, which includes a debt millage of 0.1178 and an operating rate of 5.55 mils, which is greater than the rollback rate of 5.2671 by 5.37%. So we would need a motion and a second.
May I have a motion and a second?
Madam Mayor, I'll motion.
May I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And then just the motion to adopt ordinance 19 on first reading.
May I have a motion to adopt ordinance 19 on first reading?
Madam Mayor, I'll move to adopt ordinance 19, 2017 on first reading.
Second? Anybody? Who's going to second it?
I'll second it.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Very, very well done job.
Thank you, Alan.
Okay. Next on our agenda, ordinance 22, 2017. May I have the clerk read the title, please?
Ordinance 22, 2017, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Palm Beach Gardens, Florida, amending Chapter 78 Land Development at Section 78-159, Table 21, Permitted, Conditional, and Prohibited Use Chart, and adopting new note J73 to Table 21 in order to add medical marijuana treatment centers and medical marijuana treatment center dispensing facilities to the list of prohibited uses in all zoning districts. Further amending Chapter 78 at Section 78-751 definitions by adding the new definitions marijuana, medical marijuana treatment center, and/or medical marijuana treatment center dispensing facility, providing that each and every other section and subsection of Chapter 78 land development shall remain in full force and effect as previously adopted, providing a conflicts clause, a severability clause, and authority to codify, providing an effective date and further purposes.
I'd like to open the hearing. Is there a staff presentation?
Yes, good evening, Madam Mayor, council members. Peter Hoffines, Planning Manager for the City of Palm Beach Gardens. Staff has prepared a presentation for the public benefit at the discretion of the council. If you'd like me to go through that, I can.
Would the
In light of the fact that the staff has to go home and prepare and be with their families, and that we've got first responders who are getting ready for a hurricane, I would be willing to not hear your presentation, and let's move forward.
fine with me? Anybody else?
We may have more time on the second reading of these things.
Absolutely. Is there anyone wishing to speak on this item? I don't have any cards. Okay, thank you. So I will close the hearing. May I get a motion and a second, please?
Madam Mayor, motion to move ordinance 22, 2017 on first reading.
And a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Discussion. Who would like, anybody have discussion? Anybody want to comment?
Do we want to reserve discussion on this till the second reading?
We can do
In
that.
the interest of time, I was at two very important meetings on this subject this month, and there's a lot of good information I think that we can discuss, but I think we can wait.
I agree. Okay, all right.
I do it with all of them, as far as I'm concerned.
All righty. No further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. Next on our agenda, Ordinance 23, 2017. May I have the clerk read the title, please?
Ordinance 23, 2017, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Palm Beach Gardens, Florida, establishing and imposing a temporary moratorium within the City of Palm Beach Gardens on the submittal and processing of applications and issuance of any permits pertaining to co-location or existing or the creation of new utility poles in the rights of way to support small wireless facilities or micro wireless facilities until December 31st, 2017, in order to allow an opportunity to develop regulations consistent with chapters 2017-136 Laws of Florida that became effective July 1, 2017, providing a conflicts clause, a severability clause, and authority to codify, providing an effective date and further purposes.
I do not have any cards on this, so I will close the hearing. May I get a motion and a second, please?
So moved.
Second, someone?
Second.
Okay. All I want to say is, for discussion, because I'll actually say this is just another example of an attack on home rule, period. Okay. Does anybody have any more discussion?
It's not a very controversial.
No discussion.
I don't think so.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. Okay. Now we have a quasi-judicial. May I have the clerk read the title, please?
Resolution 55, 2017, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Palm Beach Gardens, Florida, approving art in public places for the La Posada Senior Living Facility within the Regional Center Plan Community Development, PCD, as more particularly described herein, providing conditions of approval, providing an effective date, and for the purposes.
May I open the discussion? Thank you. Yep. Yep. Did any ex partes to be declared?
No.
Nope. Okay.
Hello there. Good evening. Dodie Glass representing Kisco Development with La Posada with the art. And I'm going to go through this very quickly, though you are seeing the sample, and I know the staff report was rather thorough. With me this evening is also Marco Vicchili with Kisco. And I know you all are familiar with the location. This front picture actually shows you that it's our intent to place the art at the entranceway. We currently have a flag that is located at the entrance. So it's kind of a pre-made spot. The flag will also remain on the site. That is being located just on the other side of the entry bridge. We do have some sculpture pieces that are some small children that will be relocated for the flag to be placed right at the main entry as you're coming in across the bridge for La Posada. This particular piece is located, as I noted, where the flagpole is, which is just to the west of the entrance at the guard area. There's an existing bench and landscaping which we will upgrade with this particular installation. The location is very visible from the roadway. We did go to Art and Public Places Committee, and they recommended approval. From various vantage points, the flag actually makes a great mark. The staff actually inlaid in Photoshop so you could get a feel for it. The grounds will be a little better kept than what you see in this photo, but it was to give you the actual feel. Plus, I think the guys in the office like to do the graphics to show how well they can do it. Reese Burwell is an artist that has work all over the country. He does have a studio that he specializes in outdoor work. He does do indoor work as well. I believe that your package probably goes into great detail. These are some of the outdoor sculpture pieces. One of the things that I would note about the artwork, and you have the samples there, is it's a more natural material. There was a lot of thought. The budget for this particular piece is fairly substantial because of the construction that we're doing with Phase 2 of La Posada. A portion of the funds will also go for one of the bus shelters right along Gardens Parkway at the entranceway. We've been able to work with staff to figure out a location where we can fit one of the, if you will, the slim bus shelters right at the entrance as well. The budget, as we've prepared it, again, provides for the lighting that would be upgraded for this artwork. It also provides for some refurbishment to the hardscape area and the landscape. We anticipate there probably will still be a little overage in our budget amount, and that will feed back into the Art and Public Places fund as well, and that is all addressed within the resolution. Really, there's not much more I can say. We're happy to answer any questions.
Does staff have a presentation?
Yes, good evening, Madam Mayor, Councilman. Staff does have a presentation for the benefit of the council and the public. However, most of that information would be duplicative. Staff is recommending approval, but can make a presentation at the discretion of the council.
I think we've seen it all.
Yeah, I think we come to this day as pretty well prepared. We spend hours before we get here, so.
I don't have any cards, so I will close the hearing. May I get a motion and a second, please?
So moved.
Second.
And do I have any discussion?
None.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I'm actually happy to see the bus stop in front there. That's going to be artistic. That's a
Kisco
great
is
plus.
too. They believe their workers will utilize it as well as patrons from the mall area.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Be safe, and I wish the same for staff, and I look forward to being here the next time with no chaos. Thank you.
All right, moving on. Resolution 60, 2017. May the clerk read the title, please?
Ordinance 15, 2017.
Did I skip something?
We're at Resolution 60.
Resolution 60, you're correct.
We just did the art and public places. We now we go to the.
Oh, forgive me, I'm sorry. Resolution 60, 2017, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Palm Beach Gardens, Florida, approving the site plan for Florida Power and Light electrical substation on the 5.0-acre utility parcel located in the northeast corner of the 681-acre Alton Plan Community Development, PCD, generally located south of Donald Ross Road, north of Hood Road, east of Interstate 95, and west of Central Boulevard, as more particularly described herein, providing conditions of approval, providing waivers, providing an effective date, and for other purposes.
I will open the hearing. Anyone have any ex partes?
I've got an ex parte. I had some concerns about safety. I spoke to Don, and he obviated any concerns that I have. Thank you, Don.
I also spoke with Don and also Peter Brock regarding the project 2 days ago.
Anyone else? Other than saying, are you going to be here tonight? I haven't had any conversations. So thank you. Are you done?
Good evening. Madam Mayor, council members, my name is Don Kieselewski. I'm with Florida Power and Light Company, 700 Universe Boulevard. I'm here with Bob Ballou, who is our project manager from our substation team. I will, in an effort, try to be brief, but I want you to have sufficient information to rule on this matter, which is approval for site plan of a substation here in Palm Beach Gardens. Just by way of background, I'm sure you all know how power is delivered, but generally we have power plants around our service territory, much like the one that we have in Riviera Beach. We take the power that's generated there and it is bumped up and put on high transmission lines. Those transmission lines come to substations that are within your communities. There's one right here on PGA Boulevard. We already have one on Donald Ross. Those substations take the power, they bump it down, put it across distribution lines, the ones that run throughout your communities, and then they go to a transformer that takes it down and takes it into your house. What we are requesting is approval for a substation on Donald Ross Road, which would be utilized for then distributing that power into that community. It has been a project that's been pretty much prominent for that location for some time. When the DRI went through back in 2008 for the Brigger tract, there was a set aside for utility that was there on that site. Here is the information again on the history of the site of when we acquired it, and again, the nature of it going back to 2008. As you can see here, I'm trying to get our mouse up. This is the substation location. Running horizontally, that is Donald Ross Road. Running vertically here, that is Military Trail. We currently have a substation in this proximity that says existing Ross substation, and there's a transmission corridor that runs vertical as well right here. That transmission starts off down here on PGA, goes up from that substation on Monet, comes up here, connects, and then goes all the way up into Jupiter, into Plumosis substation. We are proposing, again, another substation site, Watts substation, that is to feed essentially all the growth that has come in through this area. It will look very much in appearance to the one that is there today. If you've driven by, the likelihood that you've seen it is not all that likely. We've worked with staff originally to hide the drive into that location, and we are proposing, the staff has asked that we do the same and do the same type of landscaping for this location as well. Just want to give a shout out before I turn it over to Bob that your staff has always been a treat to work with. Particularly in this instance, they have diligently represented the interest of the town and its residents, but they've done it in a manner that's been fair and certainly cordial through our discussions. So I'm going to turn it over to Bob and let him show a little bit more of what the site plan looks like.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and council members. Bob Ballou, Florida Power and Light, and I am project manager for this Watts substation. And I'm going to quickly take you through the site plan for the site. As Don mentioned, it's the site fronts on Donald Ross Road, which is on the north side of the substation, and you'll enter it eastbound Donald Ross. Coming into the substation, we have a driveway that has been curved to help hide the station, which is similar to Ross. And the rectangle that I'm outlining with the mouse is the actual substation yard, and that houses all the distribution equipment. And we are building an 8-foot decorative concrete wall around the substation. It has decorative caps and columns, so it's a pretty attractive wall. It'll be painted, approved colors through the Alton PCD color choices there. And then on the back side to the south side is a water retention, a stormwater retention area, and then it will hook into some future stormwater improvements with the Lowe's, I guess, that's being developed to the west side of the site. So it's a very, very simple site. And then as far as the landscape itself, which is really, I think, the important component to this, we're very fortunate because we're ringing the west side, the south side, and parts of the north with existing landscape. There's some existing slash pines there. There's a lot of existing saw palmetto on the west and particularly the south. So we're keeping all that as much as we can, and then we're enhancing that. We're filling in gaps with pines and palms and oak trees and some hollies, and trying to our best way to screen the substation. And we have a artist rendering here. This is a rendering from what the substation would look like from Donald Ross Road looking south. So this is the frontage. And just so you know, this would be shortly after it's installed. So this is where the material's small, so this is kind of the worst case scenario. From here it gets better, even better. And I did want to point out that we did work with staff, and we agreed that once it's done, if there are any holes, or if there's any viewpoints that you can see, and we'll work with staff. And there is a point that I wanted to point out here, and I wanted to keep it on this graphic so you could see it. There's an area like right here that looks a little bit more open, and we had to keep that open because in the driveway we have to have room to put the transformers in on big trucks. So once the transformers are in, that would be planted up, so we'd help even squeeze that view tighter. So that gives you an overall view of what the substation will look like from Donald Ross. If there are any questions, I can certainly answer any questions.
Thank you. And do we have any questions? Staff, you don't need to make, I mean, I know you have one, but do you need to make any additions?
Madam Mayor, staff has a presentation at the discretion of the council. We'd like to thank the applicant for their kind words. They were a pleasure to work with as well. We do have conditions of approval in the development order. Should any view corridors be exposed or open, they would come back and replant those, and staff is recommending approval.
Sort of similar to what you're doing on PGA Boulevard right now, where you had to go in and do some work and had to take the landscape
And that's
out
exactly
now
right,
put
and
the
it'll go
landscape
back.
in again.
Correct.
Thank
correct.
you. I have no questions. Does anyone else?
The property backs up to the commercial parcel, correct, to the city
Yes,
center
actually, the
here,
commercial
not-
parcel, yes, ma'am. The commercial parcel is to the west and a little bit to the south, and then there is a preserve parcel on the south side.
So there's no housing that backs up to the parcel at all?
No, not right there, no. And just so you know, staff did ask us, like in this corner, you'll notice the buffer is increased because there is a development to the southeast, so they asked us to really kind of keep as much of the existing vegetation in that corner, and we've done that.
And that's closer to the pond than it is to the substation?
Correct, correct.
Okay, we went out of order just a little bit, but may I have a motion and a second, please?
Madam Mayor, did we actually close the public hearing? And I know we didn't have any public comment on this
Well,
issue.
I will close the public hearing. Thank you. May I get a motion and a second, please?
So moved.
I'll second.
Thank you. May I, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Do you want me to give you 2 seconds on FPL real quick? I know you're trying to get out of here to prepare for a storm,
Sure,
but
go ahead.
we have been preparing
Please.
for a few days.
You
So-
guys are the ones that, you're leading the charge, so.
I know. I'll try to keep you quickly on agenda. Just let you know, we have been in our final stages of preparation for Irma. All our talking points say potential impact. I think we're all pretty certain in this room that we are going to have some impact from Irma. We have 11,000 workforce ready to date, and we continue to seek out-of-state resources to bring in. Certainly, the impacts further up the east coast of the United States is hindering some of that. We are bringing some resources in all the way as far as California from PG&E. So we continue to staff up. I personally am the contact for the city of Palm Beach Gardens. All of you have my cell phone number. Certainly feel free to contact me. If you have an interest that's city-related, I do ask that you get it through Ron and your police chief to us that acts on behalf of the city. But the restoration, we are talking that there will be some substantial rebuild. Repair is in a matter of days. Rebuild is in a matter of weeks. So you have to understand the magnitude of the storm that's coming through here, even though we have invested $3 billion over the last 10 years in upgrading our facilities. It will be tried during this restoration. So we will, within 24 hours of the storm passing, issue a system-wide ETR, estimated time of repair. Within 48 hours, we will issue a by-county estimated time of repair, and then by 72 hours, we will issue a sub-county level. We will be working with your team to share information as far as outages and impacts. So thank you and be safe.
Thank you, John. You too. Ordinance 15, 2017.
Ordinance 15, 2017, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Palm Beach Gardens, Florida, amending Chapter 86, Buildings and Building Regulations by repealing Article 2, Standards, and adopting a new Article 3 entitled Floodplain Management, adopting State of Florida Floodplain floodplain management ordinance, providing that each and every other section and subsection of Chapter 86, Buildings and Building Regulations, shall remain in full force and effect as previously adopted, providing a conflicts clause, a severability clause, and authority to codify, providing an effective date for other purposes.
I'll open the hearing. Hello, again.
Good evening. Again, Peter Hoffines, City Planner. This is, as we discussed earlier at Agenda Reviews, this is just a two-part presentation for Ordinance 15 and 18. Essentially, we are taking out the floodplain ordinance from Chapter 78, which is land development, and moving it into Chapter 86, buildings. And then Ordinance 18, we are actually updating our floodplain ordinance to be consistent with the Florida Department of Emergency Management statewide ordinance. So I can go through a presentation at the discretion of the council, or if you answer any questions directly, should you have any. We do have City Engineer Todd Engel here, which can also answer any questions you may have.
I think you covered it well enough at our agenda reviews. So I have no cards, so I will close the hearing. May I get a motion and a second, please?
So moved.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you very much. Now we do the companion.
Ordinance 18, 2017, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Palm Beach Gardens, Florida, amending Chapter 78 Land Development at Division 10 Subdivisions by repealing in its entirety Subdivision 6 Floodplain Regulations in order to provide internal consistency with City Code and to remove duplicative sections, reserving Division 10 and Section 78-531, 78-540 for future legislation, providing that each and every other section and subsection of Chapter 78 Land Development shall remain in full force and effect as previously adopted, providing a conflicts clause, a severability clause, and authority to codify, providing an effective date for the purposes.
I'll open the hearing. Obviously, we don't need another presentation. No one wishing to speak, I'll close the hearing. May I get a motion and a second, please?
So moved.
May I have a second? Thank you. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. And while we do seem like we're going through this speedily, we actually have read the information. You have answered our questions at the agenda review. So I don't want people in the audience to think we're just here doing this willy-nilly. We are actually read the material, answered the questions in our agenda review. It's all online for anyone else that wants to read it. So I hope people don't think we're rushing. Well, we are a little bit, but we want everybody to be safe. So the next item on our agenda, if I'm not mistaken, is Ordinance 17.
Yes, ma'am. Ordinance 17, 2017, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Palm Beach Gardens, Florida, amending Chapter 78 Land Development by adopting new Section 78-196 to be entitled Operation and Sale of Food from Mobile Food Trucks, in order to adopt regulations relating to mobile food trucks, further amending Chapter 78 at Section 78-751 definitions by adopting new definitions for mobile food truck and mobile food vendor, providing that each and every other section and subsection of Chapter 78 Land Development shall remain in full force and effect as previously adopted, providing a conflicts clause, a severability clause, and authority to codify, providing an effective date for other purposes.
I will open the hearing. Are there any additions and changes?
No significant changes other than just some additional language added to the definition of a food truck, which was presented in the staff report.
Thank you. I have no cards on this, so I will close the hearing. May I get a motion and a second, please?
There was no issues. Nobody had any comments from the public, or there was no food truck operators that had any comments, correct?
None.
Thank you.
The only concern that I expressed in the past and expressing now, I'm concerned about the health and safety of the citizens, and I just wish we would just think about possibly how we can monitor the safety of the food that's delivered from those trucks in the future.
All the trucks will be inspected by the city's fire inspectors, and they are required to obtain Department of Health certificates. So if that addresses some of your concerns, those are the requirements.
All right, we're a little out of order. May I get a motion and a second, please?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, I'll second.
Okay. Since we just had our discussion before our motion and our second, is there any more discussion? Okay. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Motion carries 5-0. And if I am not mistaken, we are at the resolutions portion of our agenda. We have no resolutions, is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. Items for council action and discussion. Is our discussion to wish everybody a safe journey home? Be safe all this week?
I need to make a comment, Mayor.
Oh, sure.
While we were discussing ordinance 19-2017, I made a comment on how Mike or Mark or Matt may or may not have campaigned as referring to lowering the budget or looking at it. I meant it more as a compliment to everybody. I'm pretty sure we all campaigned that we would be diligent about the spending of citizens' money. So I wanted to adjust that statement, and I didn't mean to offend anybody, and it was more of a compliment than anything. So I apologize. You're welcome.
Thank you, Carl. Anyone else? Is there a city attorney report this evening?
No report, thank you.
Okay, so I am going to adjourn this meeting at 8:30. Please, everyone be safe. Staff, thank you for being here. Go home, take care of your families. Meeting adjourned.